Tess Vandermoss misses. V to her students taught 12th grade math at the high school in Clarksville, Tennessee. Her husband of 8 years, Andrew Drew Vandermoss, owned a small but very successful high-end auto repair shop. Clarksville, only 50 miles north of Nashville, had plenty of well-to-do folks in the area, and Drew's shop could handle anything foreign or domestic. He had a small crew of 4, including himself, so you may have to wait an extra day or two to get your $180,000. A 00 Mercedes Maybach S-Class repaired, but it was always done right and with the best parts. Tess and Drew met in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a senior at Georgia Tech. She was a junior over in Athens at UGA. They had been introduced by mutual friends and hit it off immediately. Tess was coming off a bad breakup and Drew had never really dated anyone seriously. Beyond lack of experience, he'd grown up with 4 brothers. His inability to understand her made him charming in her eyes. His complete lack of knowledge on the finer points of male/female courting rituals made him completely honest and vulnerable with her, which she found endearing. For his part, Drew was drawn to Tess at first sight. He was Dutch in heritage and looks. Blue eyes, blonde hair, firm muscular build but not tall, 5 feet 11 inches. Tess's maiden name was Jansen, so blood from the Netherlands flowed deeply in her veins as well. She had the stereotypical physical attributes of Northern European women. Like Drew, blonde hair she wore in a pixie cut and bright piercing blues eyes. She was more curvy than not and had long lily-white legs. Beyond looks and personality attractions, they both came from modest Dutch Protestant families, and she also had several siblings. They were at ease with one another from their first moment together. The night they met at a charity dance in Atlanta felt special to both. At first, Tess thought he could be a good distraction from her broken heart, but as the night wore on, she began to think it could be something more. It took all her 21-year-old woman's charm to coax him onto the dance floor, but it was worth it. He moved easily and was a quick study. Before they realized it, the evening was ending as the band leader announced the last dance. "Thanks for a delightful evening," Drew Tess said softly into his ear, while swaying back and forth to Jeremy Zucker's "This Is How You Fall in Love." "I hope I see you again soon." Then she planted a very soft hug. He instantly turned red, and Tess giggled like a 16-year-old sophomore who had broken curfew without getting caught. When the song finished, Drew didn't quite let go. Holding her gently, he said, "Tess, I really enjoyed the evening. Would I be way too forward if I suggested a Coke and burger at the Varsity? I have a convertible. It's not special or anything, but it is fun to drive on a warm spring night like tonight. If I'm out of line for asking, I'm sorry." "Oh," Drew Tess said in mock exasperation, "I have so much to teach you. Yes, a lovely midnight drive and a late-night snack sounds perfect. I must warn you, though, I'll probably steal half your fries." And so began a 14-month courtship that ended in a very traditional wedding at Tess's very Dutch Protestant church, by the very stern Dutch pastor who had baptized her as a baby. The first time he met Drew, he was almost as suspicious as Tess's dad, but then he caught the last name, Vandermoss, and was completely sure he and Drew were somehow related. When they finished their vows and were pronounced man and wife, Drew hugged his new bride with love and tenderness. Both the love and the tenderness were due to Tess's guidance over the last year, and Drew had taken his lessons very seriously. As they walked down the aisle, Drew's dad, Rob, leaned over and whispered in his wife's ear, "Lots of blue-eyed blonde babies on the way." If he had only known how wrong he could be. Just prior to graduation from GT, Drew had landed a position with a large structural engineering firm in downtown Nashville. He worked for them the year before the wedding and quickly discovered he hated being part of a large company. He was one of 86 engineers and was working over 70 hours per week in a monotonous environment. He was naturally curious and a problem solver. He could practice neither of those traits at his firm. Tess was completely supportive of his branching out into his own auto shop. A year to the day he had begun his engineering career, he handed in his resignation. Since he had a scholarship to GT, his dad provided him with $100K to open his doors. He had a strong business plan that included paying his dad off 100% by the end of his 5th year. For her part, Tess was enjoying teaching math to high school students. At 24, she was close enough to their age to easily understand how they thought and found creative ways to help many of them fall in love with math. She was friendly and popular with her fellow faculty and was often approached by many of her female students for advice ranging from boys, relationships, college choices, and family matters. She was off to a great start. Fast forward 4 years, Tess was now the youngest department chair at the high school, and Drew had surpassed his own plan, making his final payment to his dad 8 months early. He was trying to figure out if he wanted to branch out and open a shop on the south side of Nashville with a small number of new hires, or just keep writing a good thing. From day one, Tess and Drew enjoyed an active and, at times, creative physical relationship. Tess was more eager to try some new things, and Drew usually went along. One Friday late afternoon, the shop had closed and Drew was doing some final paperwork before the weekend. A young blonde woman pulled up in a 2018 white Honda Accord. When she got out, Drew noticed she was wearing very short cutoff shorts, a very tight black tank top that stopped about 3 inches above her shorts, and a pair of Freebird distressed sandals with 4-inch heels. She walked into his shop looking very attractive and seeking assistance. "Excuse me, sir," she said, entering his office and leaning on his desk, "but I have a terrible problem under my hood. Do you think you could help me with it? I'm not sure I am. What kind of problem?" Drew asked, willing to lend a hand. "I'm not sure, sir, but every time I rev it up, some fluid begins to leak. I tried to stop it with my fingers, but it needs professional help." "Well," Drew replied, "I guess I could take a few minutes to take a look and see if I can help you fix it." "Happy to assist you with your car troubles." She was now completely bent over at the waist, just inches from his face. "If you can't fix it, I'll be stranded, and who knows what could happen to a girl like me in a place like this." As she said this, she attempted to give off a seductive air. 5 minutes before she arrived, Drew's mind was on his paperwork. Now it was consumed with finding a solution to her car trouble. "Before I fix it, I mean diagnose the issue, I need to know the method of payment." "Do you have any money?" he asked professionally, wanting to address the financial aspect. The blonde came around the desk, pushed his legs apart, and knelt between them. Looking up into his eyes, she said, "Oh no, sir, I don't have any money. I'm sure my husband could come by later and pay you, or maybe you prefer another form of payment. I'm alone here with you and could never stop a big, strong guy like you if you wanted to take advantage of me." "Do you want to take advantage of me, sir? Do you want to use me for your own benefit?" Neither expected these unusual desires would lead to an unexpected disaster. 2 years later, Drew had turned 31 and Tess 30. They began to talk seriously about starting a family. The school district had an outstanding maternity leave policy, and combined with summers off, it would not be too difficult for them to start having kids. They debated between 3 to 4 children in total. They wanted both boys and girls, but neither cared much about the order in which they arrived. Finally, after Christmas of their 7th year of marriage, Tess stopped taking birth control. They figured as much as they intimately connected, at least 3 times per week and more when she was fertile, conceiving a child would be easy. However, by the end of February, they had not succeeded. It was too early to worry or run tests, her OBGYN had told them. "Give it a good 6-month effort," she said with a smile, "and if you're not pregnant by then, we'll discuss options to explore what may be going on." She finished with "relax and enjoy." Tess smiled. "That won't be a problem." Back in January, school had begun, and Tess was approached by Walt Chapman, Coach Cap, to the kids, the school's athletic director. He had a problem and he needed Tess's help. He popped into her classroom late on their first Wednesday back in school. With him, he had Eddie Stillman. Eddie, BE to his friends, was an exceptional 3-sport athlete, one of the best to ever come through the high school. Standing 6 feet 3 inches, this African-American young man would stand out anywhere as a prime athlete. But on top of his athletic ability, BE was also a very good student in every area except one: math. Tess had him as a freshman, and she managed to help him through Algebra 1. His sophomore year, geometry had been challenging. A mediocre grade was all he could achieve. Mrs. V. began Coach Chap. "As you know, Eddie is an excellent student and athlete. He has a good GPA and has done well on the AACT prep tests, except in math. I know you were a huge help to him a couple of years ago. Eddie is headed for a full ride in either baseball or football, but he doesn't want just any state school education. He'd love to attend a military academy or one of the better academic schools in the country. ACTs are this spring, and he's not going to get through the math portion without some serious help. We both know he's a hard worker and wants to earn his way. The teachers in the math lab are good, but it isn't clicking for him. He told me on Monday you were the only teacher who ever made math make sense. Bottom line, Mrs. V, this young man deserves a chance and we think you can help him get it. Would you take him under your wing and tutor him for the next 4 months? The AACT is the first weekend in May. We are certain you could have him prepared by then. Will you help? The idea of helping out a student in need immediately crossed Tessa's mind. She shook off any inappropriate thoughts and said, "BE, do you really want to apply yourself and work as hard as possible?" "Yes, I do, and I will," the 18-year-old replied with a determined expression on his face. Most juniors are 17, but BE's mom had passed away when he was only 6 and his world fell completely apart, so much so, the family took him out of school, and he repeated the first grade the following year. He also had a late May birthday, so by the end of the school year he would be 19. Tess continued, "I know how hard you worked when you were a freshman. I've always appreciated that about you. If you promise to give it that kind of effort, I'd be more than pleased to see if I can help." Both B and the AAD thanked her profusely. "Okay, fellas, let me put together a schedule. Probably at least 2 days after school each week and a 2-hour session 3 weekends a month should make a difference. BE, can you handle that schedule?" They all agreed to this. As BE and Coach Chap departed, everyone felt good about the plan. Tess sat and thought about the schedule and was sure it would work. Drew was never home before 6 p.m., so a couple of afternoon sessions during weekdays would be fine. He also worked 3 Saturdays each month, 7 a.m., 1 p.m., so Saturday mornings would also be fine. She didn't mind giving up some of her free time for 4 months if it meant this young man would get a fighting chance to chase and achieve some of his dreams. There was always Saturday morning detention in the cafeteria, so there would be others present in the building. Everything seemed to be in order. When she shared this with Drew, he was very supportive. "I love so many things about you, baby, but helping kids with such an open heart is a big one." "Thanks, sweetie," she responded with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, moving on from the previous conversation. "What?" said Drew, wanting to hear her plan so he could do his part to satisfy his wife's ever-present desires. "I just remembered that clumsy upstairs maid was here today, and I'm quite certain she did another poor job. Do you think you could come up in a few minutes and inspect her work? If it's as bad as I think it is, she will need some guidance to correct her mistakes. I'll be up in 5 minutes. Make it 30, big boy. She needs a nice hot bath before you straighten her out." 30 minutes later, the upstairs maid's work was discovered to be subpar. Drew spent the next hour guiding her to improve. Husband and wife fell asleep with a smile on their face. Around the same time, BE was hanging out with his football teammates and good friends Trevor and James. "No kidding, BE." Trevor marveled. "That adds up to about 5 hours per week with the coolest teacher in the school. Even I can figure that out." "Oh my gosh," exclaimed James. "That is incredible, bro. Does she have any idea how you got your nickname?" "Come on, guys," BE said, almost as if defending his new tutor's honor. "It's not like that. Yeah, she is an attractive woman. I could stare at her forever. But this is serious. I need my math grades up if I'm going to achieve what I want." "Well, excuse us for stating the obvious," brother Trevor retorted. "No reason you can't conquer math and try out some of those smooth moves you're always telling us about at the same time." "Chill, boys," BE said, letting them know the conversation was over. "It's all about the math." "Yep, of course it is," replied James. A little later, as BE was walking the 4 blocks between Mitch's house and his own, he broke out into a big grin. "Well, that is amazing," he thought. "She is one amazing woman. Who knows, maybe Mrs. V will find some exciting ways to motivate me, and she can learn how I got my nickname." Life was certainly looking up. "Hey, Grandma. Hey, Pops, I'm home. Guess how I'm going to improve my math grades?" The first 2 weeks of the tutoring sessions were challenging. BE worked hard and was committed, but Tess realized math didn't come naturally to him. She was a great teacher, but getting him ready for the AACT was going to be quite the task. Tuesdays, Thursdays after school, and Saturdays from 8 to 11 a.m. were spent going over problems. It was a slow yet steady progress, but at the end of the second week, Tess put her hand on B.E.'s shoulder as he finished an equation correctly and said, "B.E., I think you're getting it. Don't give up. Just keep pushing forward. I believe in you. Thanks, Mrs. V." B.E. replied, rubbing his head with both hands. "This is tough, but you are making it understandable. I'm very grateful." Later that evening, she and Drew were out for dinner at the local steakhouse. They were seated in a far corner, the best table in the house. John Kimball, the owner, always took care of Drew. It was probably because he hoped Drew would keep his repair bill reasonable on his 2019 Audi S6. Drew had warned him of the previous issues the car had before he bought it. He wished he had listened. Drew liked John and enjoyed his surf-turf dinner just as much, so he always took some money off the bill. "Baby, I have a confession," Tess said, massaging his leg under the table with her foot playfully. She was trying to look as nervous as possible. Drew immediately caught on, wondering why the heck he had ordered dessert. Leaning back in his seat, he folded his arms. "What have you done this time, baby girl?" She leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Well, I was taking this long, relaxing bath thinking about our evening together tonight, but I just couldn't resist thinking about your confident, affectionate self. I was overwhelmed with pleasure." Drew didn't flinch. "Well, you're going to be punished when we get home." "No, please," Tess begged, now really getting into her role. "Please don't. I'll be a good girl, I promise." "We know you can't be a good girl, Tess, and you need to be taught another lesson." Tess was immediately concerned. "What? Why not?" "Because," he said, leaning in with the most serious look he could muster with a strong attraction, "I'm going to teach you a lesson for being such a naughty girl." Tess, smiling seductively, looked up as the server brought the creme brulee. "Connie, we need that to go in the check, please. My husband is going to take me home and have a wonderful time." "Tess," Drew hissed under his breath as Connie walked away grinning from ear to ear. "Now you're really going to get it. That's what I was hoping for." When Connie came back, Drew was seated alone but with a stressed look on his face. She left the check and went to help another table. The next second, Tess appeared from under the table. Tess definitely got spanked and loved to her heart's content when they got home. The day of the ACT was on top of them before they knew it. B.E. was a bundle of nerves, but Tess had them do a thorough review over 4 afternoons that week. He was as ready as she could make him. Over the last 3 months, Tess really enjoyed getting to know B.E. He worked hard and had a great attitude. They connected over humor and at times during the frustrating moments. Occasionally, when he was really frustrated, she'd squeeze his shoulder or give him a quick hug, telling him how much she believed in him. Though neither would acknowledge it, they were becoming close. The teacher so wanted this young man to do well, and he wanted to prove to her he was worth the effort she was putting in. Without it being obvious, their touches were happening more often and lingering a bit longer. Nothing overt, but it was a mutual attraction. She was almost 12 years his senior, but there was no mistaking the connection. Tess never asked him about his nickname, although she'd heard a few of the senior girls talking. "I guess deserves his name," Blythe Connor said as she stood next to her locker with her friends, Lynn and Emma. "I've heard he is big and wide." Lynn, "Well, a girl doesn't hug and tell, but you're not wrong." Emma, "Lynn, you little flirt. Does Lucas know you're two-timing him?" Lynn, "Well, sister, you should try the flirt thing with B.E. That guy is the gift that just keeps on giving. I'm happy to be with him whenever he drops by. I've only been with a couple of guys and Lucas is no slouch, but B.E. rocked my world." Blythe, "You know Mrs. V has been tutoring him in math for the last 3 months, alone in her classroom 3 days a week. Wonder if he's taken over and taught her a few things." Emma, "I don't think he has yet, but I heard him telling James she was amazing. As a teacher, I assume." Lynn, "Let me tell you, I've seen her husband and he's attractive, but even Mrs. V would be in heaven if he stood her over her desk. He'd put more than a smile on her pretty little face." Tess was shocked to hear this conversation. She wasn't surprised that their suggestive talk girls could be that way. She was shocked that she finally realized that B stood for Big Ed, and apparently it wasn't because he was tall. Oh my, she thought to herself Tess knew nothing would come of this. Later that night, Drew was the beneficiary of Tess's newest fantasy. "Drew, you have been daydreaming in my class, young man. Now, what kind of punishment do you think you need to help you pay attention to your teacher?" They had an amazing, intimate moment for over an hour, neither realizing that this make-believe was about to become all too real. It happened so quickly, neither of them saw it coming. The last Saturday in May, 2 days after BE turned 19, he stopped by her home on a Saturday morning while Drew was at work. When she answered the door, Tess was surprised to see him standing there grinning from ear to ear. Inviting him in, she said, "BE, what is going on? Why are you here? What's with the big smile?" 28 was all he said, holding up a piece of paper which had ACT results written across the top. ACT scores range from 136. The best BE had ever done in math had been a 17. To jump 11 points was nothing short of miraculous. "Oh my goodness, that is amazing. I'm so proud of you," squealed Tess, jumping into his arms. She was genuinely thrilled for BE. Nothing in her mind was thinking of anything inappropriate. She was simply excited for his success. But as so many people are surprised at the moment, romantic tension is a tricky thing. Like water, affectionate passion always seeks to travel the path of least resistance. 3 months of close contact, a growing attraction and genuine care for each other was about to explode. The front door had swung closed when BE entered. They were completely alone. BE pulled Tess close with his strong arms and embraced her deeply. She had just gotten out of the shower, and her hair smelled of flowers. It was intoxicating. He should have set her down and backed up. He didn't. She should have apologized for being so forward and explained she'd see him Monday at school as she showed him out. She didn't. It was hard to say if she attacked him or vice versa, but it was a passionate hug for the ages. Stumbling forward, BE found the kitchen table and gently set her down. Tess was wearing a short-sleeve button-down casual shirt along with a pair of Nike running shorts. BE stepped back for an instant, taking in her beauty. "You're incredibly beautiful," he whispered. Tess always loved teasing, but she also loved giving up control. Her job always demanded she lead. She enjoyed working with her students, but there was never any doubt who was in charge. She had to encourage Drew to take charge, and when he did, she loved it, but she always wished he would simply take her, just as BE was doing at this moment. It was, for her, the perfect combination of emotional and intimate connection. For his part, BE was not an experienced lover. He had been active with 3 high school girls in the last 2 years and 1 college girl he met during a campus visit. 3 years his senior, she was the one who spent an entire night teaching him what pleased a woman. She helped him understand how to discern when a woman wanted to be loved and when she wanted intimacy. He may have been lacking in experience, but he was a quick learner. He knew Tess wanted intimacy. "BE, we better," was all she got out before he gently pulled her up and spun her around. Guiding her by the small of her back down onto the table, she was now bent over, at his mercy. "Not today, Mrs. V," he whispered. "You've been the teacher, but I'm in charge now. No teasing me or pretending you don't want this. Pat." His hand came down on her backside gently. She gasped in pleasure. "Now it's my turn." Tess purred in submission, her fantasies coming to life. She said quietly, "Yes, BE, yes, Pat." "Yes, what?" BE demanded. "Yes, BE, I want you, Pat." "What is that, teacher?" "Pat. What do you want?" "You know what I want, BE. Give it to me now." "Pat. Nope, not until you tell me. Not until you ask me. You've teased me one too many times, Mrs. Prim and proper teacher. Tell me what you want. Come on, big boy." Tess exclaimed with excitement. Tess never thought about conceiving. BE had no idea that she and Drew were trying to start a family. In the moment, she wasn't aware of her cycle. Her desire overpowered her rationality, so she didn't ask him to withdraw, and he didn't offer. It took them both by surprise. They had a really good time together. After a moment of silence, Tess spoke. "Wow, that was incredible," Tess said, trying to gather her thoughts. She began to tear up as she thought about what had happened. BE wasn't unkind, despite his animalistic desires. He switched from rough passion to tender caresses. He hugged her gently. "That was amazing, and you are amazing, Tess." He used her first name to show that he genuinely cared for her, not just for the intimacy. Tess rolled off him and picked up her shirt, putting it back on. She returned to the couch and sat next to him, placing her hands on his leg to show that she wasn't angry. That was incredible. But I'm not sure what came over me. You're an incredible young man, and I know you will be successful. However, I'm married and deeply love my husband. I don't know why this happened today, but we can't let it happen again. It won't end well for either of us. I understand, Tess. I've always been attracted to you since we started tutoring, but I didn't expect this. When I leave, nobody will ever hear about this from me. But you are beyond amazing in every way possible. They talked a bit more, with B.E. sitting there and Tess in her loosely hung shirt. Despite their passion, he hadn't given her much attention until then, and now he looked at her with eager anticipation. He knew he should leave, but he couldn't resist giving attention to her. She didn't stop him. Suddenly he stood up. Tess, what time does your husband get home? Not for another 2 hours, B.E. Tess, can you? Yes, can you please? 45 minutes and a really good time later, B.E. slipped out the back door and into the alleyway. Drew arrived home about an hour later to an empty house. There was a note on the kitchen table. I was going to text you, but my cell phone battery died. I'm going to the grocery store, school to pick up some papers, and to get my nails done. I'll be back around 3. I love you, Tess. P.S. B.E. stopped by for 5 minutes to tell me he got a 28 on his math ACT. I'm so happy for him. But I want to celebrate with you tonight. Since I should have been a better teacher and helped him get a 30, I probably need to be punished for not doing a good enough job. I'm such a bad teacher. Hugs. Drew smiled as he read the note. As she wrote the note, Tess thought that the best defense was a good offense. It was possible that someone could mention seeing B.E. visit, but since he left through the back door, which was not visible to any neighbors, no one saw him leave. It was better to be honest and upfront, not that Drew would suspect anything. He was kind and trusting. Tess felt guilty about that, but she vowed that nothing like this would ever happen again. They were starting a family. Unfortunately, neither of those thoughts turned out to be true. Over the next 2 weeks, B.E. and Tess maintained a respectable distance. Coach Cap had thanked her profusely and praised her to everyone at school. B.E. was going to get his opportunity, and it was because of Mrs. E.V. Congratulations poured in for both of them. During the months of June and July, the forbidden encounters between B.E. and Tess happened 3 more times. Tess couldn't resist the allure of B.E.'s naturally dominant passion, and she knew he would keep their secret. Each time was spontaneous, but not so much that Tess couldn't calculate that the risk of pregnancy was low. Throughout these encounters, Tess and Drew never stopped their efforts to start their family. Tess convinced herself that B.E. was just a passing phase. He would be off to college in the spring, and more senior athletes were graduating early to get a head start on their college work. B.E. was leaning towards playing football and already had several good offers. The fall football season would keep them apart. Yes, she thought to herself, it's behind me now. I've dodged a bullet. However, sometimes bullets come unexpectedly. In the first week of August, Tess woke up early, planning to go to school and set up for the upcoming year. As she slowly rolled over, she noticed her husband wasn't by her side, and at that moment she smelled the aroma of cooking bacon coming from the kitchen. He had gotten up early to make her breakfast. 10 seconds later, her head was over the toilet bowl as she vomited violently. She didn't immediately put 2 and 2 together, but after feeling slightly better, the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She grabbed her trusty pregnancy test and checked. 5 minutes later, still feeling queasy, she entered the kitchen holding the pregnancy test stick in her right hand. It clearly showed a positive sign. "Good morning, Daddy," she said to her husband, grinning from ear to ear. They hugged each other and cried tears of joy. The first few weeks were challenging for Tess. She had never been a heavy drinker in college and had mostly been healthy throughout her life. Spending 20 to 30 minutes every morning kneeling in front of the toilet bowl was no picnic. Drew was there most of the time, stroking her hair and wiping her mouth. By the 7th week, the morning sickness began to subside, and Tess's drive returned with a vengeance. During this time, they decided not to find out the gender of their baby. They both wanted the excitement of finding out together. They chose gray, aqua, and coral as the nursery colors. One of Tess's sorority sisters lived in Clarksville and was an interior decorator. Drew had to put his foot down a couple of times regarding the budget. There were baby showers and visits from excited grandparents. Tess continued teaching, although she occasionally sat down instead of standing up in front of the chalkboard. As March approached, Tess hoped for a baby during spring break. Her due date was March 22nd, perfectly aligned with the high school schedule. This meant she would get an extra week of maternity leave since there would be no classes. The last couple of months had been tough. Tess was huge, always hungry, never comfortable, and generally had a negative attitude towards everyone and everything. Even her favorite students and loving husband sometimes felt the brunt of her discomfort. True to form, Drew was a trooper, rubbing her back, feet, behind, whatever hurt at any moment. Adjusting the temperature in the house when she was hot or cold, even if this changed by the hour. He ran and got her whatever she wanted to eat if they didn't have it, and never complained when she bit his head off for no specific reason. Tess would feel bad later and cry on his shoulder for being such a meanie. Drew let her cry but always told her everything would be fine. Because that is exactly what he thought. March 19th was the first day of spring break. At 11:03 a.m. Central Standard Time, Drew's cell phone rang. He was under the hood of a 2013 Volvo C70 convertible trying to discern the source of an elusive rattle when the RPMs hit 4,000. He stepped back so he could straighten up and looked at his phone. It was Tess. He answered immediately, "Oh no, Drew, come quickly, come now, my water broke, and this little kicker is hurting me so bad. Oh, it hurts so bad. Why did you do this to me, you silly head?" "Oh no, Drew, sweetie, please hurry." Having lost track of how many times a person could say no, Drew ripped off his coveralls and would have jumped into his Bronco in only his boxer shorts if one of his guys hadn't thrown him his jeans. He raced home, collected his dirty-talking wife, who was all but incoherent by this time, blaming him for everything under the sun. They made a beeline for the hospital. Upon arrival, the natal team quickly brought them into a prep room where they were met by their OB-GYN. She was quiet and steady, since this was clearly not her first baby-delivering rodeo. "I'm hurting so much," Doc Tess wailed as they laid her back on the bed, placing her feet in the stirrups so her doctor could assess her progress. "Tess, don't be overly dramatic," her doctor chided with a smile. "Of course it hurts, sweetie. But if you think this is bad, wait until your kid is in middle school and knows everything about everything and you are just in the way. That is real pain, sister." As the doctor examined Tess, she suddenly became quite serious. "Tess, listen to me carefully. You are going to be fine, and the baby is going to be fine, but this little one is in a different position, so I'm going to move quickly to a C-section." She then firmly gave specific directions to the medical team in the room. Before leaving, she turned to Drew, who was looking a little pale. She touched him on the arm. "It will be fine, Drew. This isn't unusual. You'll have a newborn within the next 10 minutes, but I must move quickly, so I need you to stay here." She then gave some instructions, moving her team along. Tess was whisked out of the room before he could hug her. He shouted after her, "I love you." By that time, Tess was fixing her anger on some other nincompoop as another contraction hit her. It was only 15 minutes when the doctor returned to Drew. She had a smile on her face, but also a look of discomfort he couldn't quite discern. Drew jumped up, but she asked him to sit back down while she sat on the edge of the bed, removing her surgical cap. "Drew, everyone is fine, both mother and baby. Tess has delivered a 9-pound baby boy." She paused and allowed Drew to take this in. She could see his eyes brimming with tears. "They are okay, right, Doc? Can I see them? Can I hold my son? Where is Tess now?" What the doctor said next was mostly true, but she was struggling to find the words. The C-section was tough, but Tess pulled through just fine. She lost a bit of blood and had a minor fainting spell right after the delivery. She will be okay, but she hasn't held the baby yet. I'm going to give her a bit more time, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, while getting some fluids in her before we bring the baby in. But there's something else, isn't there, Doc? Drew had picked up on her uneasiness. Is my son truly all right? Drew, the baby is perfectly fine and healthy. I think you and I should walk to the nursery now and see him. If Drew thought it was odd the doctor never called the baby his son or their son, he never said. A moment later, just outside the glass looking into the nursery, Drew's world collapsed. The nurse brought a bouncing baby boy with the name tag Vandermoss on his wrist over to the window. He looked up at Drew with the most beautiful dark brown eyes Drew had ever seen. His skin was a very light brown, and his hair was a dark black. "What? I don't understand, Doc. Is there some mistake here? This can't be our son." Drew was shaking. "Drew, what I can promise you is this. This is the child your wife delivered a few moments ago. Tess had no fertility treatments, so this child was naturally conceived. This child is Tess's son." Drew's mind was spinning out of control. He leaned back against the wall trying to catch his breath. Is it possible that we could have produced a child of this skin tone and these color eyes? He asked, trying to make sense of what he was experiencing. "Drew, I see no way medically that the two of you could have naturally produced this child. Did you and Tess come up with an alternate plan without my knowledge? I'm sorry to ask, Drew, but this is important to you and your family. No plan of which I'm aware, Doc," Drew said with a distinct edge now in his voice. "Apparently my wife made her own plans and carried them through without my knowledge as well." "Dang it. Drew, Tess will be fully awake in a few minutes and in need of your support and love when we bring in her child. Can you muster the strength to offer her care right now? At least for today?" The words "her child" sent chills down Drew's spine. How could this be? How could this be? He kept mulling over in his mind. The doctor, who had never had this experience with a newborn, remained silent and let him think. They sure don't teach you this in med school, she thought. Suddenly it hit Drew like a ton of bricks. He whispered quietly, looking at the floor. "B.E. Oh my Lord, B.E. Did she have so little faith in his ability to get her pregnant that she turned to this young man? Was she that desperate that she hadn't even discussed it with him? So many questions were whirling around in his mind. He looked at the doctor in stunned silence. Finally, he spoke. "My wife tutored a young man for 4 months right before we found out she was pregnant. He is black. It must have been when they were together." His voice trailed off as he leaned against the wall, afraid he was going to pass out. The doctor quickly moved him into a chair in a small office right off the hall where they could talk privately. She was deeply alarmed. "How old is this young man, Drew? Is he a student at the high school?" Drew looked at her with empty eyes for a moment, as if trying in vain to comprehend her question. Finally, he shook his head as if to rid himself of the cobwebs. "B.E. is Eddie Stillman, and he is an adult. He will be 20 in about 2 months. He must have been about 19 when they..." He never finished the sentence. The doctor talked with Drew for several more minutes, helping him begin to process what was happening. She couldn't imagine a bigger soul-crushing moment. She was a tough cookie, but she shed a few tears as they spoke. She urged Drew to stay and be with Tess. "No matter how hard this is, it will be better if you go through it together, for the time being." Drew didn't know what to do. Most men wouldn't if they were in his shoes. Betrayal is a harsh taskmaster. The pain of someone to whom you have given all your trust violating it is hard to comprehend. To a man, knowing his wife has willingly been with another man can destroy his self-respect. Without a healthy pride in who he is, a man becomes a shell of his former self. Drew was fighting hard to keep some sense of dignity, even though it was just him and the doctor. "Drew, you don't know that Tess wasn't an unwilling participant. Perhaps he took advantage of her, even forced her. Maybe the shame was more than she could bear, so she kept it from you. You must give her the benefit of the doubt." Drew was surprised at how much this made sense to him. Yes, he thought, maybe Tess was forced and she couldn't tell me. "I need to give her a chance to explain." "Okay, Doc," he said, "you're right. I need to be with her and listen to what she has to say." When they entered her room, Tess was propped up and was coming around pretty well. She reached for Drew, and with all the strength he could muster, he went to her and hugged her. "Baby, I'm so sorry I said all those terrible things to you. I didn't mean any of them. It just hurt so bad. Is our baby okay? Where is he, or is it she?" Tess realized she has passed out prior to finding out if their child was a boy or girl. "Tess, it is a healthy baby boy, and he is fine," Drew assured her. "They are bringing him in any time now. The doctor told me how hard it was. I'm glad you're okay." Even in his pain, He was genuinely thankful she was physically okay. At that moment, the nurse wheeled in the small hospital crib with her son. Tess's eyes filled with love as they drew closer, and then her mouth flew open, and she gasped. "No, no, no. It's not possible," she croaked. Drew had gained some composure by this point and lifted the infant out of the crib, holding him tightly against his chest. Whatever the story was, this baby didn't deserve anything but unconditional love. For his part, Drew didn't want to let this moment go by without this child feeling loving arms. He held him warmly, rocking back and forth. Looking down at his wife, who wouldn't make eye contact with him, the truth began to dawn on him. "Tess, you have one chance and one chance only to tell me the truth. This child deserves a good life with loving parents. Is the father Eddie Stillman? And if he is, did he force himself on you? Did he hurt you? Or was your encounter by mutual consent? Please, Tess, the only thing I can't handle is a lie." Tess was crying now, unable to hide her guilt. She could say it was forced and Eddie would maybe go along with it, but she knew she would never do something like that to him. "No," she whispered, "it wasn't forced." "Oh, my Lord Drew, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. What have I done? What have I done?" She melted into 1,000 tears. Somehow, Drew kept his cool while holding the baby. He didn't flinch or tense up. He cradled the child with loving arms while tears of emotional desolation streamed down his face. He said nothing for about 3 minutes, which seemed like an eternity. The baby was sleeping in his arms. Finally, leaning over the bed, he gave him to his wife. "You need to hold your son, Tess. He needs to know you will always love him." Tess took him in her arms even as her tears continued to flow. She knew Drew was right. This was her child, her son. He would grow up with her, take his first steps, speak his first words, play ball, get in trouble, do good, fail, and succeed, all with her by his side. At that moment, she was devastated at what she had done to her husband, but she agreed it wasn't the baby's fault. He should feel only love. After she cared for him, comforted him, and he fell back asleep, she asked the helper to take him back to the nursery. They would decide on a name tomorrow, she told her. Drew had patiently sat in the chair next to her bed, giving her uninterrupted time with her newborn. Now they were alone with one another for the first time since the preparation room. Now they were alone with the truth, the future, and the worst nightmare either of them could ever imagine. Tess reached for Drew's hand. He flinched and pulled back. She sobbed. He couldn't bring himself to look at her but started to speak. "Your parents and mine plan to be here in the morning. I'll leave it to you to tell your folks. I don't know how, but I'll find the words to tell mine." "Drew, Please don't say anything, Tess. I have no words for the hurt I feel now, for the pain of your betrayal, but also what your actions are going to mean to that beautiful child we've both held." They sat in silence for a good amount of time, both lost in their own thoughts. They could hear the joyful conversations of other new moms and dads in the adjoining rooms. Laughter, relief, hope for the future, all surrounded them, but impossible for them to experience. Like a person dying of thirst in the desert season oasis, any hope for a new refreshing spring was only a figment of their imagination. Tess was trying to comprehend the consequences of what she had done, which could never be undone. She wondered how she could have been so caught up in a few hours of wild excitement to not realize it could change the course of her entire life and the lives of those she loved. Loved, she thought. How can I even say I loved Drew based on what I did to him? The tears came again. For his part, Drew was mostly numb. His wife, whom he adored, had tossed him aside for someone younger. Had she ever truly loved him? She had to have, or she wouldn't have married him. Was that correct, or just his assumption? They had so many good memories in the 9 years they had known each other. The look in her eyes always spoke of love, but maybe it was all a charade. Maybe he was just a safety net to be kept in place while she enjoyed her life. He wanted to disappear. Drew got up from his seat, which startled Tess. "Are you leaving me?" she asked with trembling lips. "I'm going back home to try and collect my thoughts. I need to figure out what I'm going to say to my mom and dad. I don't want to get ahead of myself, Tess, but obviously everything has changed, and it will never be the same. I feel so lost and alone." Somehow Drew was able to compose himself enough to call his mom and dad with the news. They took it hard, saying some hurtful but not untrue things about Tess. Drew asked them to call his brothers and then suggested they not come to Clarksville for now. They agreed to his wishes. Tess had a more difficult time with her parents. She had to repeat herself several times before the truth began to sink in. They asked how Drew had reacted. She replied she wasn't sure. Tess explained the hour or so after the delivery, when Drew held the baby and sat with her, but also confided she had no idea if he'd ever come back. She admitted how awful what she had done was, but also asked her mother to come be with her when it was time to take the baby home in 2 days. Tess grew up in a home where her parents still spoke Dutch. She wasn't fluent enough to have a conversation, but she did understand it. Her mother now only spoke it when she was excited or upset. "I'll be there, Tess," she replied. "I just hope you have a home to go to." 2 days later, Miriam Jensen loaded Tess and her grandbaby boy into her Toyota 4Runner. Tess had named him Michael Levi. She thought it sounded good with her maiden name, which she assumed she'd be returning to in a few months. She had messaged B.E., telling him her idea, but also to see if he wanted to offer suggestions. He told her the name she selected was a fine name. Drew had not returned to the hospital or answered any of her phone text messages. She was beyond nervous when they pulled into the driveway. His car was gone, but there were lights on and the shades on the windows were up. He must have assumed she was coming home. That was a relief. Her key working in the front door lock was her second good sign. It was the last one. Mir took Michael upstairs and placed him in his crib as he continued to sleep. She left Tess in the kitchen staring at an envelope with her name written on it in Drew's handwriting. Her hands were shaking. She knew she had to open it, but she could only imagine what was written would be her husband's reaction to her ugly and selfish choices. She sat down at the table. "Tess, by now you are home. I hope you and the baby are safe and healthy. You will find I have stocked the refrigerator and kitchen pantry with everything I could think of. I'm pretty sure you have enough diapers for a couple of months. I've left Mitch in charge of the shop for the rest of the week. Since it is spring break, the appointments are about half of what they usually are. I'm getting in my car and driving. I don't know where I'm going or when I'll be back, but I need to clear my head and think. Right now, it feels like a dark cloud has enveloped me, and I'll never escape. My emotions go back and forth between confusion. Why did you do this? What did I not give you that you needed emotionally? Anger, I feel mostly anger towards you right now. I thought we had a wonderful life marriage, but now I discover you were unsatisfied with me, but never willing to tell me. Do you know how foolish that makes me feel? What right did you have to do that to me? Sadness, my life as I knew it is over. You wanted more, you went and found it, and now I'm the odd one out. The guy who couldn't keep his wife. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust another person again, and that makes me very sad. Lonely ever since I met you. I've never felt alone, even when we were dating and not always together. Now I feel completely alone, cut off from the person I thought was my soulmate. Despairing, I have no hope. I'm not leaving you yet or leaving Clarksville or my business. I'm going on a road trip for somewhere between a week and a month to think and clear my head. I haven't closed any accounts, nor have I filed for divorce. You won't answer the door anytime soon and find someone serving you with legal papers. There is plenty of money in our joint checking account, $15K, and you have whatever is in your account from your teaching job. All our bills are current. Nothing is due for over a month. As I said, I'm not sure where I'm headed except to say, nowhere in particular or important. I just need to drive and get away. Please do not try to contact me while I'm gone. I promise you I will be back, and at some point, we will talk. By the way, do you remember the first slow song we danced to? Zucker's This Is How You Fall in Love. I thought that would be our song forever. Now I think of the lyrics and they only sound like a cruel joke. Drew Tess dropped the note on the table, buried her face in her hands, and sobbed. Mir came and held her daughter. She rocked her back and forth, whispering, a comforting cup. After several moments, she led Tess upstairs to the guest bedroom, wisely avoiding her in Drew's marriage bed. She laid her down and covered her with a quilted comforter. She hummed quietly, stroking her daughter's hair until she fell asleep. Then the strong Dutch woman returned downstairs to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and began to sob. 2 days later, Drew woke up in a dark hotel room. He looked at the inexpensive alarm clock, which read 5:45. He assumed, now he knew what time it was, he just had to remember where he was. Oh yeah, Austin, Texas. To be specific, he remembered he was at the Fairfield Inn by Marriott in North Austin, just off Highway 35 South. He chuckled to himself, "How the heck did you get here?" He vaguely remembered finding himself in Memphis, then Shreveport, and at that point thinking, why not Austin? He'd never been, but heard a lot about the microbreweries, coffee shops, and slogan, "Keep Austin Weird." Well, dang. Life didn't get any weirder than this. So I suppose Austin is my home away from home, he thought, as he dragged himself out of bed and headed for the shower. An hour later, he found himself downtown, not too far from the UT campus, at a local coffee shop. He had a strong cup of something called Costa Rican Queen, along with 2 breakfast tacos. He hadn't eaten much of anything for the last 2 days and realized he was starving. When he finished, he went back up to the counter, paid for a refill in his to-go cup, and suddenly turned to leave. As he did so, he accidentally bumped into the person in line behind him, a woman who looked to be about his age, who was now wearing some of his coffee on her off-white blouse and blue jeans. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Drew blurted out. "Did the coffee burn you? Are you okay?" She was definitely taken aback, but she remained calm. "I'm all right, the coffee is hot, but no burns." "Oops," Drew said again. "I'll pay for your dry cleaning or a new shirt. Can I buy your coffee for you?" "Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. What can I do?" First, she replied with a smile, "You can stop saying oops so loudly. I'm okay, and a little spill never hurt anybody." Secondly, yes, you can buy me a cup of coffee and pay for my dry cleaning, or a new blouse if they can't get the stain out. And thirdly, you can sit down with me for a minute and we can drink our coffee together. You're accident prone, so I'd hate to see what you would do if you got behind the wheel of a car. Drew was rarely lost for words, but her kindness and humor had an impact on him. He had not expected to find friendliness in a stranger, especially not one on whom he'd just spilled half his coffee. She ordered a vanilla soy latte go, and they found a small table outside on the patio. It was a beautiful early spring morning in the Texas Hill Country. "I promise to be more careful, but let me apologize again for being such a klutz." He held out his hand. "I'm Drew Vandermoss." "Nice to meet you, Drew Vandermoss, even if you did try to maim me with your coffee. I'm Lori Templeton." An hour later, Drew had learned that Lori was from the West Coast, that she worked in the event planning business, she was single, and she was very good at asking questions. She was indeed good at asking questions, and she had learned quite a bit more about him than she let on. It was clear he was troubled and married, and that, based on her experience, was a bad combination. As they were getting ready to leave, Drew said, "Lori, I know we've just met, and this is going to sound unbelievably forward, but could I have dinner with you tonight? Before you answer, I know you know I'm married. I'm not looking to hang out or anything shallow like that. My marriage is in deep trouble, and I'm taking a few days to clear my head and try and determine next steps. Talking to someone completely objective could be very helpful to me. I'd meet you at any restaurant of your choosing. My treat, along with the dry cleaning bill. If you want, please bring a friend or colleague. I promise I'm honest and sincere." Lori was good at discerning people and felt she could trust him. "Okay, meet me at El Alma tonight at 6:30. Dress casually." They met, ate dinner, and Drew told his story. Lori could see his pain and knew intuitively that while he loved his wife deeply, he would never abandon his integrity. He wasn't naive, but she could also see his heart was not malicious. When he finished, Lori poured them the last of the wine and began. "Drew, first, I'm so sorry for your pain. Betrayal is the worst. Now let me tell you another story, not unlike yours. A true story like yours about 2 people I loved dearly, who destroyed their lives and the lives of almost everyone around them. My friends Bennett and Cindy had a secret relationship for 8 months behind Cindy's husband's back. Long story short, Rick, Cindy's husband, found out, in just about the worst way imaginable, although your experience is about as bad. Rick was devastated, and like you, could never accept what had happened. And like you, he didn't want to be vengeful. He thought deeply about his options, but he never asked anyone's advice. He closed himself off to everyone around him, and that led to a terrible disaster that is still causing pain. Rick died in a single-car automobile accident. Cindy was devastated and still is to this day. Rick died 3 years ago, but her pain has not lessened. I also happen to know it will get worse before it gets better. Bennett isn't the type to settle down, but he did care for Cindy. He is also devastated how his desire ended up destroying a good man and ruining an entire family. Rick and Cindy had twin children who are now 12 and growing up without their dad. Bennett will never be the same, and I also know in the future his life will be filled with pain. I won't disclose how I know this. I believe Rick allowed bitterness and pride to guide his decisions. In the end, his decisions, in my opinion, made and will make a bad situation even worse. Someday in the future, there will be consequences for both Cindy and Bennett. But I know, if Rick had allowed a friend or two into his heart and mind, his marriage may have ended, but he'd be alive today. For the next hour, Drew asked several thought-provoking questions, and Lori answered each of them and asked him some in return. It was close to 9:30 when they started to wind down. So I guess, concluded Lori, the question is, what do you want, Drew? I mean, what do you want that is reasonable and possible, given you can't change the past? I don't think you want to go back home to Clarksville and accept what has happened. But do you want revenge, and if so, at what cost? Lori Drew replied, clearly you've never been to Tennessee. It's Clarksville, he said in his best Tennessee accent. You need to explore a bit more. For the first time in the evening, Lori saw him smile. Maybe there is some hope, she thought. I do want justice in some way, but I don't want to become bitter and hateful. B.E. isn't innocent and he is responsible for what he's done, but I have no interest in spending my time and effort in destroying his life. He should experience some remorse, but I know how tempting Tess can be, and I know, even if he initiated it, she didn't stop him and probably encouraged him. Today I despise her, and I love her. I want her to feel the pain I'm feeling. I want her to understand betrayal and hopelessness like she's brought into my life. At the same time, this child needs a fully present mother. He didn't do anything to deserve any of this. He deserves a chance at a good life. It will be tough enough on him as it is. I don't want to make his life any harder. Darn it, I don't know what to do. And that, my new friend, is a step in the right direction. You don't have to solve it all today or even tomorrow. What you have solved today is you're not sure what to do. That is enough for now. Maybe you can drive back to Clarksville, pardon me for not knowing the name of your little town, and try to make one more decision. Take one more step before you get there. Maybe your next decision will be to seek wise advice from your dad. From what I've heard you say tonight, he is a very wise man. Something like that will be progress for the next day. What I'm trying to say is I believe this is an incredibly difficult process of elimination. But every time you know you want to do or not do something, you're moving in the right direction. You may end up deciding you don't want to be married to Tess anymore, and that will be okay if you think carefully about what is best. At this point, she reached out and took both his hands. He was surprised but didn't pull back. Today you know you want her son to have a chance at a good life, and you don't want to spend energy destroying B.E. That is enough. Now start the rest of your journey by finishing your wine, getting a good night's sleep, and then face tomorrow when you wake up. I hardly know you at all, but I have a good sense about people. I warned both Cindy and Bennett that they were going to end up together if they weren't careful more than a month before it happened. I have good intuition, and my intuition tells me you're a man of integrity and you have some good people in your life. It hurts now, but I know you can get through this. She then leaned in, hugged him, got up, and walked out. As she left, she turned around with a smile and said, "If I'm ever in Clarksville, I'll look you up." The next day at work, Lori called a friend who worked for the FBI. "Jules, I need a favor, friend. I hope it is nothing illegal, Lori. I'm grateful for the discount you gave me on my wedding venue, but not that grateful. Well, maybe just a tiny bit. I need a cell phone number of a woman in Clarksville, Tennessee named Tess Vandermoss." Why? Probably better you don't know, but I promise, that part of the equation is more than legal, it is fair. An hour later she had the number and was dialing it with a smirk on her face. A woman with a tired voice answered. "Hello, is this Tess?" "Yes, who is this?" she replied. "My name isn't important, but since you have my cell number, I guess you could track it down. My name is Lori, and last night I met an amazingly handsome and wonderful man named Drew Vandermoss. He must be one of the most charming men I've ever met." Lori heard a gasp on the other end. "We met at a restaurant in Austin, Texas, and immediately hit it off. I could tell he was deeply hurt right from the start." But when he began to share, what a story he had to tell. He spoke of his stunningly beautiful wife, a high school math teacher with an insatiable appetite for fun. My new and dear friend Drew also told me she was very friendly with a young guy who is 12 years younger. He said she had left him for someone else. He also told me how he found out when his wife gave birth to the child of her young partner. She could now hear crying on the other end, but she was just getting warmed up. Well, the more he talked, the sadder he became. I didn't want to see him in such a state, even though I'd only just met him yesterday. You know how those deep blue eyes can captivate a person. Anyway, I couldn't leave him feeling that way, so I did what you should have been doing all along with only him. I took him home and spent quality time with him. We spent time together in my car, on my patio, on my couch, and eventually in my bed all night long. I lost count of how many times I felt satisfied, and I'm pretty sure I won't walk straight for about a week. Oh my goodness, he's amazing, and he knows how to make me happy. He was incredible, just in case you have forgotten. I begged him to stay with me, and I was as convincing as I could possibly be. By the way, I can be really convincing. He's out getting us coffee now, and I'm going to change into my upstairs maid outfit before he comes back. I seem to remember him mentioning that little fetish last night. So Tess, darling, I just want to thank you for letting go of him, for doing what you did and throwing away your marriage. Don't be surprised if you never hear from him again. Through her sobs, Tess began to express anger towards this terrible person. How could you? You cruel person. My husband is suffering terribly, and you took advantage of him. He was vulnerable, and you played on that to spend time together. You awful person. You better hope I never find you, because I'll teach you a lesson. How could you do such a thing to such an amazing man like my Drew? She choked up and couldn't continue, so Lori took the opportunity to jump back in. Tess, I'll tell you a little secret. I never touched your husband. Well, that's not entirely true. Right before the end of our dinner, I held his hands for about a minute and gave him a small peck on the cheek. What I did for about 3 hours was listen to a broken man struggling with his feelings for you. You broke his heart, but he is still staying strong. He's going to try and figure out how to put his life back together. I have no idea if it will be with you or without you. In my opinion, he deserves someone better. If he does end things with you and comes back to Austin, you can believe me, I will invite him to my home and see where it goes from there. He's a better man than you deserve, Tess, but you might still end up with him. Last night he told me he just couldn't bring himself to be mean to you. That's how strong he is. But I decided somebody needed to make you feel some pain, so I took it upon myself to do that. Drew never touched me, apart from holding hands briefly. He never thought about it. He has too much integrity for that. But I wanted you to understand a fraction of the hurt you caused him. So if he comes back and if he offers the chance for healing, forgiveness, and starting over, you better remember how you felt for the last couple of minutes. Remember your anger and despair. If you get a second chance, you better not ruin it. There was a brief pause before Tess quietly said, "Thank you," and hung up the phone. 2 days later, Drew wasn't feeling much better as he saw the Clarksville city limit sign, but his mind was clear. He had spent hours on the phone with his dad during the drive, and he knew he wanted to confront Tess with honesty, his anger, and a small amount of hope. It would be a long road, and it might end in separation, but that was okay. It would be his journey, and in some way, Tess's as well. He didn't have the answers, but he had a starting point. He chuckled to himself. He knew without a doubt that when he told Mitch, his reply would be, "I don't know, boss." He then hit the speed dial for Tess's number. "You're a mean one, mister. Grinch, you have bugs in your smile. You have all the tender sweetness of a sickly crocodile, mister. Grinch, given a choice between the two of you, I'd take the sickly crocodile. Doctor." Seuss. Drew dialed Tess's number on his speed dial. He was 10 minutes away from home. He hadn't seen her in a week and was wondering if he should have spent more time in Austin cooling off a bit. He wanted to deal with her betrayal directly and with honesty, but he didn't want to confront her angrily when they talked. She answered on the first ring. "Hello, Drew. Tess. I'm about 10 minutes from the house. I'd like to come by and pick up some clean clothes if that is all right." "Of course, but this is your home. You should stay here. Do you want me to find somewhere else to go?" No, I'm sure the baby is comfortable where he is, and I've been driving for 2 days. I'd like to get a good night's sleep, then go by the shop and check the boys in the morning. Maybe we could meet at noon. His tone was flat. He shared nothing of his emotions. Okay, do you want me to make something for you for dinner? No, but I would appreciate it if you could pack some clothes in my gym bag and leave it on the porch. That way I won't have to come in. Is it that bad, Drew, that you can't stand to see me? Tess, I've always been honest with you, and I always will be. So the answer to your question is, yes, it is that bad. I cannot trust what I might say to you after driving almost 900 miles and being emotionally and physically exhausted. Your bag will be on the porch in 5 minutes, she replied softly. Thanks. Do you think your mom could take the baby out while we talk tomorrow? A couple hours should work. What is his name, by the way? Yes, Mom can do that for us. His name is Michael Finn. That's a nice name, Drew replied. Then he hung up. Drew slept restlessly at the Fairfield Inn just off Highway 24. He was in the garage by 6 a.m., an hour before anyone else arrived. He checked the work orders and took a general stock of where they stood. As he had predicted, the past week during spring break had been slow, but the appointments for the coming week were already almost full. Having taken Lori's advice to heart, he had made one decision today. He was staying in Clarksville, or Clarkston as she had mistakenly called it. That made him chuckle. He would continue to grow his business and make a life for himself. Divorce seemed more than likely, but that wasn't a decision he needed to make this morning. One step at a time. Tess tossed and turned all night. Her mother suggested a mild sleeping pill, and about 1 a.m. she finally took one and was able to get about 6 hours of sleep before the morning light was streaming into their bedroom. Odd, she thought. I still see this as our bedroom. Probably not much longer, though. She showered, fed the baby, and talked with her mom most of the morning. Her mother advised her to listen more than talk, not make promises she couldn't keep, and for goodness sake, don't try to push Drew in a direction he didn't want to go. This was a first conversation her mom reminded her. Even if there wasn't a second one, she wisely counseled her daughter not to try and manipulate the situation. At 11:45, her mom left. Drew was welcomed enthusiastically by his crew when they began to arrive around 7. How are we doing, Mitch? Things running smoothly? I don't know, boss, I guess so. You're better with the books and schedule than me, but I don't think I messed up too badly. Are we staying in business? Nope, we're not closing. Yep, I'm staying. I'm in a tough spot, brother, I won't lie to you. But the place I need to be to get through it is right here with my friends. I'm seeing Tess this afternoon, so I may have more answers by then, but I do know I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, Mitch. Mitch smiled and turned to give his attention to a 2017 Hyundai Genesis G90 that needed new brake pads. As he left, he said, "That's what I figured," which, translated from Mitch speak, meant, "I care about you too, brother." Drew pulled into the driveway at noon. He parked and knocked on the front door. Tess was surprised he didn't just come in. He doesn't see this as his home anymore, she thought to herself as she looked in the mirror one last time to make sure she looked presentable. She put on a smile as best she could as she opened the door. She wanted to dive into his arms and hold on to him tightly, but she kept herself as composed as she possibly could. "Drew, the door was unlocked. This is your home. You don't need to knock. Please come in." "Thank you," Tessie replied, ignoring the house comment or just leaving it alone for now. They sat down uncomfortably at the kitchen table. Tess asked if Drew wanted something to drink. He took a bottle of water. "Always the gentleman," Drew asked. "Tess, would you like to start, or do you want me to go first?" Taking her mom's advice, she asked him to go first. He looked relieved. 8 days ago, I rushed home, picked you up, and we raced to the hospital. Even with all the complaining you did due to the pain of the contractions, I was the happiest person in the world. I was getting ready to be a parent to our child with the only person in the world I truly loved. My heart was so full I thought it might burst. That joy was interrupted for a moment when the doctor said the baby was breech, but I was confident that everything would work out fine. I believed, with all the prayers our parents and friends were saying, you and the baby would be okay. When the doctor came out of the delivery room, I knew right away something was off. She assured me both you and the baby were fine. She told me you had delivered a healthy 9-pound baby boy. Looking back, I realized she never called him your son or you and Tess have a baby boy. Then she took me to the nursery, and at first, I thought there was some mistake. The doctor assured me that this was the baby you had given birth to. I asked if there was any way medically we could have a child with his physical characteristics. She said it was extremely unlikely, which is when she began to ask me some difficult questions. Did we change plans and have someone help you get pregnant? If not, did I have any idea if you sought medical assistance or a sperm donor without telling me? Then the worst question, was there a chance you had a romantic relationship with another man who obviously looked different than me? I answered no to each question, but a moment after the last one, it dawned on me. It had to be Eddie. You had spent so much time with him. There was no other logical explanation. Somewhere, somehow, you had left me for him. It was a soul-crushing moment that I'll always carry with me. The doctor asked if it was possible he had forced himself on you. I couldn't imagine that, but I knew I had to ask you. Eddie always seemed like a good kid, a nice young man. Forcing you into a romantic relationship seemed beyond any logic. But I asked you and you told me no, it was mutual. Tess, I have no idea how and where we went wrong, and you stopped loving me. You never gave me a hint that you were dissatisfied with me as a spouse in any way. You never gave me a chance to fix what you felt was broken. Sure, we fought from time to time like every other couple, but you convinced me we were together for life, and the love I had for you was the same you had for me. I still can't believe I never saw this coming or never realized it when it happened. I assume it was more than once, that you had ongoing romantic involvements, but you were skillful at hiding it from me. Clearly, he never used any safety. My pride and happiness as your spouse were destroyed in an instant. Now I wonder how many others have there been. Were you ever faithful to me? Was it all just a trick? Am I just the biggest idiot husband in history? The hour I stayed with you in the hospital before leaving was the worst hour of my life, but I was determined to try and stay calm for the sake of the baby. Michael, I knew if you and I fought it would be terrible for him, even as an infant, and whatever else, he didn't deserve that. But finally, I had to get out. I had to distance myself from the humiliation and disgrace I felt sitting with a woman who ridiculed me behind my back by being intimate with another man, a man 12 years younger than her. Someone whom the school district trusted. I was quite certain he was somewhere laughing at me too, so I left to give myself some space. I drove a couple thousand miles in the last week, made a new friend, and got some great advice from her and my dad. Her name is Lori, and she lives in Austin, Texas. I met her completely by accident, but maybe that was one of those moments of fate, because I'm not too proud to say, I think she may have saved my life. She objectively helped me sort through my feelings of being overwhelmed. I was despairing, and she gave me a shred of hope, just enough to get me pointed in the right direction. That brings me to today, Tess. I'm here to speak my mind and hear you speak yours. I know there is nothing you can say now or ever that will take away the pain of the last week, but I have decided my life is worth living. I'm not a bad person, and I'm not a failure as a man or a spouse. I trusted you with my heart and you shattered it. I'll never trust you again. I don't know what your plans are or even if you have any, but I'm staying put here in Clarksville and I'm going to move forward with my life. Drew concluded. I think we should separate as quickly and quietly as possible. I assume the high school will not renew your contract for next year, even if they don't fire you outright. As I said, Eddie is a guy, but he is also a student and you violated everything a teacher should stand for. Right now, I hate being in the same room with you. I can't stand being close to you. For some reason, you came close to destroying me, and I know I'll be really sad for a while. But I'm going to live my life and make the most of it. It hurts to know it won't be with you, but that was the choice you made. Now we both have to live with the consequences. When Drew began speaking, his head was down and his posture was slumped over. But as he spoke, he grew more and more confident and angry. He was not perfect, far from it. But he was a good man, a good partner and friend, and a good provider. He knew he didn't deserve any of what Tess had done. He may or may not ever love another woman, but he sure as heck wasn't going to let a wife who could betray him so deeply control his choices or his well-being. By the time he was finishing his comments, he was looking Tess squarely in the eyes with a confidence she could never hurt again. As Drew spoke, Tess went back and forth between crying, looking into his eyes, and looking at the floor. She also realized something profoundly true. She had lost him. He was being brave by coming here and facing what she had done to them, but there was no mistaking it. He no longer belonged to her, and he never would again. Tess composed herself and responded, "Drew, I do want to address a few of your statements. I understand my lies to you mean you probably won't believe me, but if I'm ever going to heal, it must start with the truth. Eddie and I had a relationship on 4 occasions between May and the end of July. I never planned for it to happen the first time, but then it was a bit of a thrill to continue for a couple of months here and there. I knew it would pass and he would soon be gone. Before that, there never was another man in my life. From the time we met, you are the only man I've ever been with emotionally until 9 months ago. You never failed me as a husband in any way. I always adored you in our relationship. I don't know what came over me with Eddie, but nothing you did or didn't do drove me to him. It was all my fault 100%. You are a good man, the best man I've ever known or probably will know. I'm confident with time, you will truly believe what you just said, that you should have a good life. You deserve a good life. I've spared the district the distraction of firing me and have resigned. I don't think anyone is talking about taking any legal action against me, but if they do, I'll face the consequences. If there is any hope for us, I'll stay right here in Clarksville and do whatever I can to rebuild our marriage. I desperately hope there is that chance, but if not, I will accept it. We can part without any hard feelings on my part." She was crying again. "I must tell you how sorry I am for my actions. I am ashamed of myself and what I did to us. I don't expect you to accept any of this, but I am devastated by how terribly I treated you. I have no right to ask your forgiveness, but I owe you the honesty you've given me." As Tess sobbed, Drew gave her a few moments. When she began to settle down, he replied, "Tess, I don't know whether to believe you or not, but I do know I'm not going to give you or anyone the chance to repeatedly hurt me. You are correct. Our marriage has been destroyed and there is no fixing it. I think we can go through a divorce without too much trouble. Jim Cornell is a good man known to both of us, and I'm sure his firm can help us sort out what needs to be done. I'll call him tomorrow morning unless you have any objections." Tess shook her head. "Yes, he is a good man." "That would be fine." Drew continued, "You can stay in the house as long as you need to. Eventually, we'll need to sell it and split the assets. I have no desire to ever sleep in this house again. You'll have enough money to support you and Michael for at least a year. By then, you should be able to get back on your feet. I'm sure your folks are not happy with you, but they love you and we're there for you. Drew, before you go, there's something you should know. Lori contacted me 2 days ago. It must have been the morning after the two of you had dinner." Drew was genuinely shocked by this revelation but said nothing. Tess could see from his eyes he didn't give Lori her number. That was a small relief. She spent about 5 minutes telling me how she had fooled around with you 3 different ways the night before. Drew began to object, but Tess held her hand up. "Let me finish, please." She was very detailed about your time together throughout the night. She told me she had taken you away from me and you weren't coming back. She was extremely convincing, and I exploded, calling her every name in the book and vowing to find her and ruin her life. I knew you were vulnerable, and I despised her for taking advantage of you. But then she stopped and told me none of it was true. She wished it was. She was impressed with you, but she explained she made it all up just so I could understand in a small way the pain I caused you. Drew sat back in surprise, wondering how a woman he had only known for a few hours could defend him like that. In an instant, he thought he might have to make another trip to Texas. It worked, Tess concluded. I knew in that moment how devastating my actions had been. That's why I'm not begging you to stay and give us a chance. That's why I'm not disrespecting you by saying it was just physical or it didn't mean anything. That's why I won't fight the divorce. Nobody should ever experience what you went through. And for that, I am sorrier than I can ever put into words. They sat there for another moment knowing the conversation was over. The decision was made and divorce was inevitable. Drew stood to leave, but before he did, he said, "Thank you for sharing that with me, Tess. You didn't have to, and I appreciate it. For the record, maybe I'm naive, but I do believe you are sorry." He turned to leave, but before he did, Tess asked, "Drew, do you think you could hug me one last time?" He stopped, turned around, and smiled sadly. "No, Tess, I don't think I can." With that, he walked out the door. Epilogue: Jim Cornell did manage the divorce, which was finalized within a couple of months since it was not contested. Tess moved back to Georgia with Michael and her parents. It took her 2 years to return to work. She landed a job as a waitress at the local cheesecake factory. She gets lots of requests for dates but turns them all down. Maybe someday, she thinks. Tess never taught again. Drew did open a second shop in North Nashville, and 6 months after the divorce took a vacation to Austin. Word of Eddie's behavior spread back to Knoxville, and he lost his scholarship. He played a couple of years of JUCO ball. He works for a small insurance firm in Atlanta and sees Michael 2 weekends a month and 2 weeks in the summer. He and Tess only speak when making plans for Michael. Mitch still says at least once a day, "I don't know, boss."